On a remote Pennsylvania farm in 1865, where the rolling fields met dense patches of forest, a family carried secrets that whispered through the beams of an old barn. The patriarch, a stern man with eyes like polished coal, oversaw the land with rigid discipline, yet beneath his watchful gaze, a hidden world lingered. Locals spoke of strange sounds at night, the scrape of shovels against soil, faint murmurs from the barn, and sudden, inexplicable shadows. Travelers passing the property sometimes glimpsed figures moving behind the thick wooden slats, though the doors were firmly locked. The family's unusual reticence, combined with peculiar nocturnal activity, ignited curiosity and fear, painting the farm as a place where ordinary life intersected with something deeply unnerving. At the center of this mystery was the eldest daughter, a young woman named Eleanor, whose quiet demeanor belied her sharp awareness of the secrets her family kept. Those who encountered her in town noted her distant gaze, as if she were watching events unfold far beyond ordinary perception. In hushed conversations, neighbors would remark on the frequent trips Eleanor made to the barn at night, always returning with dirt on her hands and an uneasy expression. Rumors began to swirl. Were these laborious tasks simply part of farm work, or was there something more sinister buried beneath the floorboards? The ambiguity of her actions became a magnet for speculation, compelling anyone with a curiosity for the unknown to ponder the farm's hidden truths. Adding to the sense of foreboding, the family's history was intertwined with Pennsylvania's turbulent past. The Civil War had ended only months prior, leaving the region tense and unsettled. Soldiers returned home bearing psychological and physical scars, while neighboring farms suffered economic hardships and mysterious livestock deaths. Against this backdrop, the Carsons' barn seemed to thrum with unseen energy, as though the land itself remembered and responded to past traumas. When visitors entered the property, even in daylight, a subtle unease took hold, soft echoes of movement, and the faint metallic tang of soil disturbed in secrecy. It became increasingly difficult to separate reality from the subconscious impressions left by the farm's oppressive presence. The family's patriarch, Mr. Carson, maintained a strict routine of daytime labor and nightly observation, yet he was rarely seen engaging with neighbors, and town gossip hinted at a history of silent disputes, unresolved debts, and whispered threats. Behind the barn, layers of soil were meticulously disturbed, suggesting a careful concealment of something the family did not wish discovered. Locals reported that dogs refused to approach certain areas, and farmhands hired for brief stints would leave, citing a feeling of being watched or uneasy spirits. Such accounts contributed to a growing aura of dread around the property, framing it as a nexus of hidden truths. One summer evening, as dusk crept across the fields, Eleanor lingered at the barn's edge, pausing to survey the farmland in dim light. The wind carried the scent of freshly turned earth, mingled with a faint, coppery odor, unidentifiable yet distinctly unsettling. Shadows from the barn's beams stretched long and fractured, intersecting with the silhouettes of trees, creating the illusion of movement where none should exist. In that tense twilight, the first visitor to glimpse Eleanor's pale, motionless figure would later describe a sensation of deep wrongness, as though the air around her vibrated with silent warnings. The uncanny precision of the family's nocturnal rituals and the almost ritualistic disturbance of the soil beneath the barn set the stage for an unraveling that none who encountered it could ignore. By nightfall, the atmosphere thickened with unseen menace. The farm's boundary between ordinary life and concealed horrors seemed to dissolve. Faint creaks echoed from the barn's timbers, mingling with the whisper of the wind and the distant calls of owls. The moon illuminated the soil in uneven patches, revealing small depressions and freshly overturned earth, sparking questions that would remain unanswered for years. Observers described feeling a weight in the air, a psychological tension that made even breathing seem audible. Each motion of the family within the barn became a calculated performance of secrecy, heightening the sense of narrative suspense that would enshroud the farm for decades. The combination of Eleanor's enigmatic presence, her family's rigid secrecy, and the restless land created an environment ripe for speculation. What was being buried beneath the barn? Could it have been simple remnants of farm work, or something more sinister, deliberately concealed? Townspeople could not decide, yet their fascination grew with each whisper and furtive glance, each shadow crossing the moonlit fields. By the time the first full moon rose high above the Pennsylvania countryside, the farm was no longer just a homestead. It had become a focal point of fear, mystery, and anticipation. The hooks were in place, drawing observers into a story that promised revelations, dread, and a glimpse into secrets that had festered beneath the earth, unseen yet profoundly felt. In the mid-19th century, Pennsylvania was a region of contrasts: fertile farmland and dense forests, industrious towns and isolated homesteads. The Civil War had recently concluded, leaving deep scars on both the land and its inhabitants. Soldiers returned with experiences that haunted them. Communities wrestled with the loss of life and resources, and families like the Carsons attempted to maintain normalcy while navigating the turbulent aftermath. Life was governed by hard labor, strict social hierarchies, and a constant awareness of both natural and human threats. Agriculture formed the backbone of daily existence. The Carsons' farm, like many in the region, relied on seasonal cycles, with planting, harvesting, and livestock tending dictating the rhythm of work. Barns were not only storage for crops and animals, but also spaces for clandestine labor, construction, and sometimes concealment. In rural Pennsylvania, barns symbolized industry and privacy, but they also became repositories for secrets, physical and social, that families sought to shield from neighbors and law enforcement. Within this environment, the lines between ordinary chores and hidden deeds could blur, creating spaces where the unexpected could remain unseen for years. Social norms emphasized reputation and appearances. Families maintained strict decorum, with clear divisions between public interaction and private behavior. Gossip spread quickly through small towns and rural networks, serving both as entertainment and as a tool for enforcing conformity. Yet the Carsons' reputation for quiet reclusiveness, coupled with the peculiar behavior of young Eleanor and other family members, fostered suspicion. Community members speculated about hidden chambers, forbidden items, or illicit acts occurring behind the thick barn doors. In a culture where appearances were crucial, deviations from expected behavior became magnified and often terrifying. The post-war era also heightened interest in the unexplained. Newspapers occasionally printed stories of mysterious disappearances, strange noises, and unexplained deaths, blending fact and sensationalism. Scientific understanding of psychology, disease, and environmental hazards was limited, and communities often interpreted anomalies through folklore or superstition. In the Carsons area, rumors of spirits, restless souls, and unseen watchers were common, and any strange sounds from the farm could be explained as manifestations of supernatural influence as easily as human action. This cultural backdrop magnified the impact of the family's secrecy, embedding the farm in local memory as a locus of dread. Religious life played a central role in shaping perception. Ministers, pastors, and laypersons interpreted extraordinary events through moral frameworks, emphasizing sin, punishment, and divine justice. The Carsons, though not overtly pious in public displays, lived in a community where the church influenced social conduct, and deviations from moral expectations were scrutinized. Local sermons and conversations often revolved around morality tales, sin concealed, and the consequences of hidden transgressions. This moral lens intensified the aura surrounding the family and their barn, suggesting that secrets buried beneath the floorboards could be both literal and symbolic, reflecting hidden moral failings or societal transgressions. Education and literacy were limited, particularly in rural homesteads. Families relied on oral traditions, practical skills, and personal observation. Scientific inquiry was often merged with anecdotal experience, and local knowledge about soil composition, decomposition, or pest management was blended with folklore. The Carsons' manipulation of soil beneath the barn, whether for mundane agricultural reasons or something more sinister, would have appeared opaque and mysterious to outsiders, reinforcing the sense that the farm held dark and impenetrable secrets. The inability to understand or explain certain phenomena created fertile ground for legend. Economically, the region was recovering from wartime disruption. Farmers faced challenges in maintaining crops, livestock, and trade networks. Labor shortages, combined with the pressures of rebuilding, fostered isolation, as families sought self-sufficiency and privacy. The Carsons' reclusiveness was likely reinforced by practical necessity, yet their nocturnal activities and strange rituals stood apart from ordinary labor. Community members, already sensitized by war and economic strain, were more likely to interpret anomalies as sinister, as each unexplained sound or movement resonated against the backdrop of hardship and collective anxiety. By the late 1860s, the combination of environmental, social, and cultural factors created a setting ripe for both real and imagined horror. The barn became a microcosm of the family's hidden world, where the boundaries of normalcy, secrecy, and superstition intertwined. It was a space where physical labor, psychological tension, and social fear converged, producing an atmosphere in which the extraordinary seemed plausible. Every creak of timber, every disturbed patch of earth, every furtive glance from Eleanor carried amplified significance, magnifying the sense of dread that would come to define the Carsons' farm in local memory. The historical context of Pennsylvania during this period provides crucial insight into the events at the farm. Post-war trauma, agricultural isolation, social scrutiny, limited scientific understanding, and the cultural prominence of folklore all contributed to a climate in which a single family's secrecy could inspire lasting mystery. The Carsons' actions, whatever their purpose, cannot be fully separated from these conditions. They were enmeshed in a web of economic necessity, social expectation, and psychological tension, making their hidden deeds both feasible and, to outsiders, terrifyingly opaque. Understanding this environment is essential to appreciating how ordinary life could become intertwined with unspeakable suspense, setting the stage for the incidents that would grip the imagination of the community for generations. The first hints of something amiss began with small incidents that seemed ordinary at first, yet in hindsight revealed a creeping pattern of unease. Farmhands noted missing tools, unexplainable disturbances in the barn, and subtle shifts in the soil patches that appeared freshly turned despite no apparent reason. Eleanor, ever observant, was frequently seen moving silently among the barn's beams, often carrying sacks or tools, her actions precise but unreadable. Locals whispered about glimpses of shadowy figures at night, watching from windows or hidden within the barn's depths, creating a pervasive sense of being observed. One evening, a hired hand named Thomas arrived to tend the livestock. He noticed the strange arrangement of beams and floorboards, a latticework of wooden planks that seemed out of place. While fetching hay, he heard faint scuffing sounds beneath the floor, a soft thud that suggested movement underground. Hesitant but curious, Thomas leaned closer, only to retreat as a chill swept over him, a coldness that seemed unnatural. Later, he reported seeing Eleanor pause mid-step, her gaze fixed on the ground, and then shift abruptly toward the doorway, as if sensing a presence he could not detect. The tension in her posture, combined with the silence of the night, made the ordinary act of tending animals seem charged with dread. As weeks passed, incidents escalated. A child from a neighboring farm wandered too close to the Carson property and vanished for several hours. When found, the child spoke of a dark figure moving beneath the barn's floorboards and hearing muffled, urgent voices. Though the story was dismissed as childish imagination, the pattern of disappearance and reappearance contributed to a growing unease. Animals also behaved erratically. Livestock would refuse to enter certain pens. Dogs growled at empty corners and cats stared with dilated pupils toward unseen spaces. Each occurrence layered tension, transforming the farm into a locus of anticipation and anxiety. One night, a storm struck, and lightning illuminated the fields in stark flashes. The barn's outline appeared jagged, its windows like hollow eyes. From within, a series of rapid thuds echoed, punctuated by the clatter of falling tools. Eleanor was seen emerging from the shadows, covered in mud, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. She paused to observe the sky as thunder rattled the rafters, then returned to the barn with deliberate caution. The combination of weather, sound, and her presence created a tableau of suspense, each element reinforcing the notion that the barn was more than a simple storage space. It was a site of hidden labor, possibly of secretive and dark purpose. Over time, more disturbing signs manifested. The patriarch, Mr. Carson, insisted on inspecting the barn nightly, often carrying lanterns that cast long shadows over the dirt floor. His movements were methodical, almost ritualistic. On occasion, he would uncover small objects buried beneath the soil bones of small animals, fragments of wood arranged oddly, and inexplicable marks on the floorboards. Eleanor and other family members assisted silently, never speaking, their coordinated actions suggesting a plan or knowledge unknown to outsiders. Neighbors heard faint cries, soft and intermittent, as if someone or something were trapped or communicating beneath the earth. These auditory phenomena heightened fear and speculation, particularly as no one could discern a rational cause. A hired carpenter arrived to repair a section of the barn roof. While working, he noticed anomalies in the floorboards, nails twisted unnaturally, gaps that appeared deliberately concealed, and subtle depressions in the soil beneath. As he attempted to lift a plank, he felt the cold air of a cavity below and heard scratching sounds that prompted a hurried retreat. Eleanor observed from a distance, her face illuminated briefly by the lantern's flicker. The carpenter left that night, pale and shaken, convinced that the farm concealed something sinister. Reports like these became common, creating a collective psychological tension that fed into the legend of the barn. Other incidents involved physical accidents that seemed ordinary but carried psychological weight. One worker fell from a loft, narrowly avoiding injury, yet claimed to have seen a shadow pulling him down, an ephemeral presence only glimpsed at the edge of vision. Another reported being stung by a swarm of insects that appeared to emerge from cracks in the barn structure, yet no visible nests could be found. Each event, while explicable in isolation, coalesced into a pattern that suggested the farm was a site of unusual, almost supernatural activity. The interplay of natural hazards, hidden spaces, and human vigilance created an atmosphere where ordinary accidents were imbued with extraordinary dread. By the harvest season, the farm's barn had become the epicenter of anxiety. Community members speculated openly. Were there tunnels beneath the structure? Did the family hide animals, tools, or something far more sinister? Eleanor's quiet movements, the patriarch's nocturnal inspections, and the workers' testimonies formed a narrative that blurred reality and imagination. Each night, the house settled with groans and creaks, and the barn in particular seemed alive with secrets. Shadows stretched unnaturally in the lantern light. The wind carried sounds that could be interpreted as whispers, and every step across the soil seemed to echo with hidden histories. The culmination of these incidents led to the first serious attempt at investigation. A local magistrate and 2 neighbors entered the barn during daylight, armed with lanterns, measuring tools, and a mix of curiosity and fear. What they discovered was a labyrinthine structure beneath the floorboards. Shallow pits filled with debris, remnants of old wood, and occasional fragments of bone that could be attributed to animals, though their arrangement suggested careful placement. Eleanor observed silently, never intervening, yet her eyes held a knowledge beyond the investigator's understanding. The barn became both a literal and metaphorical site of secrets, objects buried, and stories concealed, a complex interplay of human action, environmental factors, and psychological tension. Each incident, meticulously recorded by those involved, reinforced the notion that the Carsons' farm was a place where normalcy and dread coexisted, where the mundane act of farm labor became a stage for suspense, fear, and enduring mystery. As word of the Carsons' peculiar activities spread, the local community reacted with a mix of fear, fascination, and moral outrage. Neighbors whispered of strange noises, unexplained lights flickering in the barn, and eerie shadows moving across the property at night. Families living nearby began keeping their children indoors after dusk, fearing that the farm's secrets could extend beyond its boundaries. The mere mention of the Carsons' name in conversation carried an undertone of dread, as if invoking their household might summon the unseen presences believed to dwell beneath the barn. The local pastor played a central role in shaping public perception. Preaching from the pulpit, he warned of hidden sin, secretive behavior, and the dangers of shielding truth from God and one's community. His sermons transformed mundane suspicion into moral concern, framing the Carsons' secrecy as not merely eccentric but potentially corruptive. Parishioners listened attentively, absorbing the notion that any hidden act, no matter how small, could invite divine punishment. Superstition and morality intertwined, turning the farm into a moral cautionary tale, where ordinary events became layered with ethical and spiritual significance. Doctors and local healers, consulted for both physical and mental well-being, offered clinical interpretations of the incidents. Some attributed the family's behaviors to stress, post-war trauma, or hereditary psychological conditions. Others speculated on the influence of environmental factors: mold, poor ventilation in the barn, or exposure to decaying organic matter as potential causes of anxiety, hallucinations, and erratic behavior. While their explanations were grounded in observation, limited scientific knowledge meant that many theories could not account fully for the series of disturbances. Consequently, uncertainty fueled suspicion, with each unexplained sound or event interpreted as evidence of concealed malfeasance. Journalists from neighboring towns published sensationalized accounts, blending fact and speculation to attract readership. Reports described the barn as a haunted labyrinth, where shadows moved independently and strange objects appeared buried in the soil. Illustrations, often exaggerated, depicted shadowy figures lurking in corners and family members acting with silent, almost ritualistic intent. These stories, widely circulated, amplified fear far beyond the immediate vicinity of the Carsons' farm. While local authorities sought to verify claims, the combination of first-hand testimony, rumor, and sensational journalism created a persistent image of the farm as a locus of dread and intrigue. The psychological impact on the community was palpable. Residents described sleepless nights, heightened alertness, and a persistent feeling of being watched. Children reported nightmares of being trapped beneath the barn, while adults recounted inexplicable chills and fleeting glimpses of figures in peripheral vision. Cognitive biases, such as pattern recognition and confirmation bias, heightened perceptions of threat, as ordinary events were interpreted through the lens of previous incidents. The more the farm's mysteries were discussed, the more tangible and terrifying they became, shaping collective memory and reinforcing the legend. Family members themselves were affected by public scrutiny. Eleanor's movements, once private and routine, were now scrutinized by neighbors and investigators alike. The patriarch maintained a stoic exterior, but reportedly expressed private frustration and anxiety, aware that their actions, whether innocent or deliberate, had become inseparable from rumor and speculation. The family's social isolation deepened as visits from outsiders became infrequent and fraught with tension. In essence, the community's fear reinforced the family's secrecy, creating a feedback loop where isolation bred suspicion and suspicion amplified fear. Local authorities faced challenges in interpreting the incidents. Sheriff deputies occasionally investigated the property, yet the physical evidence was minimal, ambiguous, or obscured by the Carsons' meticulous concealment. When pits were examined, they appeared empty or contained only debris, leaving investigators uncertain about the significance of what had been reported. The lack of concrete findings did not diminish public concern. Rather, the ambiguity magnified it, allowing imagination and rumor to fill the gaps, transforming the farm into a site of enduring unease. In sum, the community's reaction combined moral, psychological, and social dimensions. Religious interpretation, limited scientific understanding, sensational journalism, and personal observation converged to create a narrative in which the Carsons' actions were both mysterious and menacing. Each interaction, story, and investigative attempt contributed to the perception of the farm as a locus of hidden danger, where everyday life was inseparable from suspense and dread. The Carsons' property became more than land and structures. It became a symbol of concealed knowledge, the intersection of human secrecy and societal apprehension, and a reflection of the anxieties inherent in a community grappling with the unknown. The tension that had been building over months reached its peak one autumn night, when the wind howled across the Pennsylvania fields and the sky was obscured by a dense rolling fog. The Carver's barn, long the subject of whispered speculation, became the stage for a night that would define local legend. Lanterns swayed in the hands of those inside, casting fragmented, trembling shadows across the beams and floorboards. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind pressing against the walls, was amplified into a portentous echo. Eleanor moved with careful precision, her footsteps soft but deliberate as she carried a collection of small, carefully wrapped objects toward the barn's far corner. Her face was a mask of concentration and subtle apprehension, the glow of the lanterns reflecting a determined, almost ritualistic expression. The patriarch followed, his lantern illuminating the barn's interior in stark contrast, revealing irregularities in the floorboards, depressions in the soil, and the faint outline of shallow pits that had long been concealed beneath hay and debris. Suddenly, A loud snap reverberated through the barn. One of the beams had shifted under weight. The sound cracked like a whip, and both Eleanor and her father froze, their gazes darting toward the source. From the shadows emerged a figure, an outsider who had ventured too close, drawn by rumor and curiosity. The stranger's lantern cast a small circle of light that trembled with every step, highlighting the intense expressions of the family members. Fear and anticipation hung thick in the air. The barn, already charged with tension, seemed to close in upon them. A struggle ensued. The outsider attempted to retreat, but the uneven floor and hidden pits impeded movement. Eleanor's movements were swift and deliberate, the patriarch's presence looming, their combined efforts subtly guiding the stranger toward a safer exit, but also maintaining control over their domain. The air was thick with dust, the smell of hay and earth mixing with the metallic tang of adrenaline. The noises of the struggle, the thud of boots, the scuffing of hands against wood, the labored breaths amplified the sense of peril. Amid the chaos, other elements of the barn seemed to awaken. The shadows danced violently, elongated by the flickering lanterns, creating spectral shapes that blurred the line between reality and imagination. Every floorboard, every nail, every hollow space beneath the surface seemed imbued with anticipation, as if the barn itself were a silent participant in the night's events. Eleanor and her father's movements were precise, almost choreographed, balancing the need to protect the family's secrets with the instinct to maintain safety for all present. The climax of the evening arrived when a lantern toppled, spilling molten light across the dirt floor and illuminating the shallow pits beneath the barn. Dust rose in clouds, obscuring vision, while the family worked with urgent coordination to restore order. In that fleeting moment, the hidden depths beneath the floorboards became visible, revealing the carefully concealed layers of history, debris, and objects whose presence had sparked years of speculation. The observer could finally perceive the complexity of the space, the meticulousness of the family's concealment, and the eerie quiet that followed the immediate flurry of activity. By the time the fog lifted and the final lanterns were extinguished, the barn had returned to its silent, watchful state. The family emerged from the shadows, physically unscathed but psychologically changed, acutely aware of how close the night had brought their hidden world to exposure. Outside, the mist rolled across the fields, muffling sounds and obscuring details, leaving the surrounding landscape eerily still. The community, unaware of the precise events within, would only hear fragments, rumors of lights, shadows, and fleeting movement that ensured the farm's legend would endure. This night crystallized the tension that had defined months of secrecy and suspicion. It represented the apex of suspense and danger, blending human action, environmental unpredictability, and the weight of accumulated fear into a tableau of suspense that would resonate long after. Every detail, the creaking wood, the shifting shadows, the precise yet frantic movements of the family contributed to a crescendo of dramatic tension, ensuring that the carver's barn became an enduring symbol of mystery and dread in the local imagination. In the days, months, and years following the climactic night, the carver's farm remained a locus of fascination and unease. The family continued their quiet, deliberate routines, tending to fields and livestock, yet beneath the veneer of normalcy lingered the heavy weight of secrecy. Outsiders occasionally passed through the vicinity, drawn by rumor, but none ever gained insight into the depths beneath the barn or the precise nature of the family's concealed activities. Each glance at the property seemed to confirm both the ordinariness and the inexplicable strangeness of the place, a paradox that made the farm all the more compelling to those who heard the stories. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones about what they had witnessed and what they imagined. Children, often the first to notice oddities, described fleeting shadows and sounds that adults dismissed or rationalized. Adults, however, could not fully separate reality from rumor, and the human mind, prone to pattern recognition and storytelling, often filled gaps with details more horrifying than what was likely true. The carver's careful maintenance of appearances allowed them to exist alongside the community without ever fully integrating, creating a social liminality that further fueled fascination. Speculation regarding the family's activities became both an intellectual curiosity and a source of unease. Local historians and chroniclers documented tales of the farm, sometimes blending verifiable incidents with anecdotal reports. each iteration slightly reshaped to suit the teller's interpretation. Psychological theories of the time attempted to explain the family's behavior in terms of stress, trauma, or hereditary disposition. Others considered environmental causes, mold, poor ventilation, or the physical and olfactory impact of decaying matter as contributing to heightened anxiety and erratic behavior. Yet no single explanation could encompass the complexity of the events, leaving mystery intact. Cultural context played a significant role in how the story endured. In a post-Civil War society, communities were negotiating changes in social norms, property rights, and the boundaries of public and private life. The carver's insistence on secrecy, coupled with the physical manifestation of hidden spaces, resonated with contemporary fears about hidden sin, moral corruption, and the potential for domestic spaces to conceal danger. The barn, both ordinary and extraordinary, became a symbol of these anxieties, a tangible reminder that human behavior could defy observation, regulation, and comprehension. Even within the family, reflection and apprehension persisted. Eleanor's recollections of the climactic night remained vivid, blending fear with fascination. The patriarch, though outwardly stoic, was reportedly mindful of the symbolic and literal weight of what lay beneath the barn. The act of concealment itself became a ritualized assertion of control over space and narrative, an intimate acknowledgement that some aspects of existence are best left undiscovered, or at least undisclosed. The tension between revealing and concealing, between action and observation, created a psychological landscape as rich and complex as the physical one beneath the floorboards. Generations later, the carver's story continues to resonate. Folklorists and historians revisit accounts, piecing together fragments of testimony, archived letters, and oral histories. Each reconstruction is inevitably partial, influenced by contemporary cultural attitudes toward secrecy, morality, and the uncanny. Readers and audiences, particularly those drawn to dark historical narratives, find in the carver's tale a reflection of enduring human fears, of the unknown lurking within familiar spaces, of secrets held too tightly, and of the subtle, pervasive ways in which human action can shape community perception. Ultimately, the farm and the barn endure as symbols of mystery, of caution, and of the inescapable intersection between human secrecy and societal curiosity. Whether any tangible evidence of the family's concealed actions remains is uncertain, yet the psychological and cultural footprint is indelible. Observers are left with questions. What exactly lay beneath the barn? Were the objects hidden there sinister, mundane, or somewhere in between? Did the family ever feel the full weight of exposure, or did they exist in a careful balance between revelation and concealment? These questions unanswered allow the narrative to persist, leaving an impression of quiet dread and unresolved intrigue that stretches across generations. In the final reflection, the carver's story is not merely about what happened in a barn in Pennsylvania. It is a meditation on secrecy, observation, and the human capacity for both curiosity and fear. The echoes of that singular property, its hidden depths, and its meticulously maintained boundaries reverberate through time, inviting each new generation to confront the shadows that lie just beyond the light of understanding.